So the Rambling Brothers have been recently rewatching Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. We are currently, as of the time of recording, are on season 5, and we're getting through the filler of the Grand Championship and the Capsule Monsters, which, ooh, there's some filler there. But I more so wanted to talk about how, in the first season, you know how, and let me explain this because I'm sure there's people who don't know. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a trading card game, but there was an anime, and I believe I read somewhere that the anime existed before the trading card game. So that's why in the first season there are like no real rules, and sometimes cards that just have abilities that don't really make a lot of sense. So keep that in mind. The series follows Yugi Moto, his best friend Joey Wheeler, his other two friends Taya and Tristan, but they're very much background supporting characters. And then you have my favorite character, and I know how basic this sounds, but I mean, come on now, he's so awesome. You have Kaiba, Seto Kaiba, who is Yugi's rival, who is the owner of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. I'm sure you've seen them around somewhere. And he's just super cool. I love Kaiba, even though I know it's like a super basic thing to do. It's like liking Wolverine when you like the X-Men, right? I mean, come on, it's super basic. But either way, the first season has Yugi. There's this villain named Pegasus, and he captures Yugi's grandpa's soul. Yugi must go into the tournament playing the card game in order to get his grandfather's soul back. And throughout the whole first season, this is the whole first season, by the way, there are just like made up rules that don't like, there's like field bonuses, there's cards that never existed, they're just being thrown left and right, like Yugi's magic arrow. There's a moment, okay, there's a moment where Yugi uses his magic arrow to fuse it with his undead mammoth, or whatever it's called. I think it's undead mammoth. He shoots it at Kaiba's ultimate Blue Eyes White Dragon, and because it's an undead type, it can't fuse correctly, so therefore the Blue Eyes is slowly dying. It's just like it's so ridiculous. Like, it's such a ridiculous thing. And if you're gonna watch the show, may I highly recommend the 4Kids English dub, only because of how ridiculous it's been censored. So there's these scenes in the Japanese version where their characters very obviously holding guns, and in the English version, they edit out the guns, but they still have the characters pointing, so it looks like the characters just pointing their fingers. And it's very funny looking. It's hilarious looking, and some backstories are just completely rewritten or cut out, and it just looks it's horrible. It's so bad it's good. But why I bring up the first season more so is because it reminded me a lot of how we, the Rambling Brothers, ended up playing Yu-Gi-Oh! When we first started getting into it. We have a few tins, we have a few decks. I might end up posting them on social media. I'll have to get around to taking a picture later. But it was very much just like that. Like, we understood the basics of, like, you have to sacrifice stuff, which they don't do in the first season, but we didn't really follow the whole rules because they were too complicated for us when we were a kid. We just liked, summoning monsters. And we didn't even follow fusion rules at times. We just more so, like, if we had a polymerization and we had two monsters on the field, we'd be like, fuse these two to summon blank. And so it was just like, the first season very much felt like how we used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! How we used to just sort of make up rules on the spot, or how we didn't really understand what all the cards did, but we still use them because they look cool. I think that's part of the reason why a lot of kids get into card games, is because card games look cool. I know we did end up buying a Magic the Gathering pack because the artwork at Magic the Gathering is really, really cool. But this is about Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's go back to Yu-Gi-Oh! So Yu-Gi-Oh! The first season, it does its job. It introduces a show. It introduces its characters. It introduces the game. Doesn't really introduce that many rules. That's where we come into the second season. In the second season, that's when they start implementing more rules that are in the actual game, such as you having to sacrifice or tribute summon to summon stronger, higher level monster. Every monster, if you look at a Yu-Gi-Oh card, they have, and granted, I haven't kept up with Yu-Gi-Oh, but in the old Yu-Gi-Oh cards, they have a star system. Like 1 through 4, you can just summon. 5 through 6 or 7, I think, you have to sacrifice 1, and anything above that, you have to sacrifice 2. And so in the second season, they start introducing the tribute summons. They start introducing these Egyptian god cards, which we actually, I think we have all of them. I have to double check that. But yeah, we have the Egyptian god cards. I remember how cool we thought they were. I am very much I would say more of a winged dragon of Ra. So you got three Egyptian god cards, right? You got Obelisk the Tormentor, you got Slifer the Sky Dragon, and you got the winged dragon of Ra. And Slifer's thing is that like the more cards you hold in your hand, the stronger he gets. Obelisk is like a straight 4,000 attack and defense, but he also has some abilities that in the show are pretty ridiculous, but in the actual card, I don't think they're that ridiculous. I'll have to look up the card effects later. I'm doing most of this off of memory, so forgive me. But then the Winged Dragon of Ra was always an anomaly to me. I still don't really understand what it does. It's like Exodia, and that's back in season 1. Forgive me, I'm going all over the place. But back in season 1, Yugi has this card. We actually have all of the Exodia pieces. There's this character named Exodia, the Forbidden One, and he comes in his head. He has 5 parts to him: his head, his 2 arms, and his 2 legs. And if you play all of them on the field, then you automatically win. Though I think he is banned in tournaments. I know there is a real life counterpart to Yu-Gi-Oh, and that people still play in tournaments. They still do deck building. They still do like tournaments, and there's a ban list. There's certain rules and regulations. I remember in the show they tackle that there are people who cut their cards, so then that way the cards, when you're shuffling the deck, the cards lay on top. And so in order to counteract this in actual tournaments, you have to use these sleeves. We actually own a few sleeves. Not all of our cards are sleeved. All of our cards are in okay condition. They're not like ripped up or anything. Though going back to season 2, that's when they introduced, and I'm sure maybe if you've seen this, you might want to look it up, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Disc. It's like this cool arm, like machine it's like this machine that you clamp onto your arm. You could play your Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards there, but very highly do not recommend getting a real one because it will ruin your cards. It'll cut them up. It'll dull the sides. It'll look horrible. They'll look bad. But in season 2, they use these dual disc, and part of the problem with the show is that I get it. It's like it's a trading card game, right? So you have to make it somewhat exciting. So they make it more exciting in that when you summon these characters, they are holograms. They're hologram monsters, and they make it seem like super realistic. Like Kaiba explains that like in the hologram technology, they have their smells, they have their sounds, they have like physical presence in a sense, sort of, because like when the characters get attacked, obviously it's anime, so they do like the whole like I got attacked kind of thing. But I mean, like, it's a hologram, right? It didn't actually hurt them. And then they play up the Egyptian god cards in that they have actual magic and spirits in them, but at the same time they're trading cards. You could just rip them in half. And it's just like, it's a little weird. It's a little like, okay, kind of thing. Like, I can, there's a little bit of suspense of disbelief where it's like, I could get maybe like emotionally hurt or something. But they also add in these things called Millennium items. And Yugi has the Millennium Puzzle, and he has the spirit of a pharaoh, who not to spoil, well, I guess this is kind of spoiler, but forgive me, who has lost all of his memories, but you do figure out who he is later. I guess it's not much of a spoiler. But he ends up dueling for Yugi because, Yugi is very, like, small. He's very, very small. He's small, he's shy, he's not very confident, so the pharaoh comes in whenever he has a duel, but there are times when Yugi ends up dueling, and the pharaoh is pretty much just like a tall Yugi. It's really interesting that the pharaoh had the exact same hair as him. It's really weird. But they add like Egyptian magic, and there's this place called the Shadow Realm. I'm sure you've heard of that, or like some joke about it or something, but it's like a place where like they try to explain that like the souls of the monsters are actually there, and that like back in Egyptian times they played the card game in that they had souls of monsters trapped in these tablets, which became Yu-Gi-Oh cards, which is just like, it's a little, like you need some suspension of disbelief. It's not really believable at times, where it's just kind of like, okay, these Egyptian god cards, they're cool and all, but I mean they're holograms. Like, these Egyptian god cards have no real power other than in a trading card game. And part of the plot is that there's this character named Merrick who wants all 3 Egyptian god cards to rule the world. But it's like, is there no such thing as, like, a gun or anything in this world? Like, sure, you could have your 3 Egyptian god cards, but I mean, what are the holograms going to do against the army? But I mean, he never wins, right? Oh, well, I guess that's kind of a spoiler. He never wins. He ends up losing to Yugi, and Yugi gets all the Egyptian god cards. And then a thing I will say about this series is that there's quite a bit of filler, in the sense that even season 3, there's filler in season 1, there's filler in season 2, there's filler in season 3. The entire beginning, the entire half, I think the first half, is all filler. It's all just anime only filler, not in the manga. There is a manga to this. I'm sure eventually I'll read it, but it's not on my priority list right now. And season 4 is just all filler, if I remember correctly. I think season 4 is just all filler. Season 5, which we're doing right now, the first 2 arcs, stories, whatever you want to call them, are all filler. But season 5 is very much the conclusion. In case you're wondering, no, we are rewatching it, so we do know how it ends. I don't want to spoil it for anybody in case you do end up watching it, but there is an ending. And then there's also a movie that continues on. I believe it is Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Side of the Dimensions. There's also a lot more Yu-Gi-Oh! Than just Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. And right around... So, okay, there's Yu-Gi-Oh! There's Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Then there's Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. 5Ds is where we, the brothers, fell off. We fell off because we just couldn't really keep up. And it's just like, these Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards are expensive. Ooh, baby. But... And then from 5Ds, from my understandings, it went from 5Ds to Zexal, Arc 5, and the newest one is called Vrains, or V-Rains? I don't know. Vrains? It's like brains, but with a V in front. And, it's like in GX, they didn't really introduce that much crazy stuff. But in 5Ds, they introduced a thing called Synchron Summon. And then in either Zexal or Arc 5, they introduced Pendulum Summoning, and they changed the look of the cards. Like, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards look completely different than when I remember. And it's like I've always wanted to try to get back into Yu-Gi-Oh! But I just there's too many new rules. There's a lot of, from what I saw a video once explaining, like, there's a lot of just like auto duel decks, especially there's an online version of Yu-Gi-Oh! And there's a lot of decks where it's just like the other player doesn't even get to do anything. Like, the person just constantly lays down cards with new effects and everything. And it's just like, it's too much. It's too much to get into. With trading card games, I feel like you have to really be there in the beginning, and then you have to keep up with it. Like, you have to dedicate yourself to one card game. It's very hard to just like get into a card. It's like Hearthstone. I don't know if any of you have played Hearthstone. It's on PC, it's on mobile. I got in when it first started, but then once it started having expansion packs that I couldn't afford, I just stopped playing. And now I revisited it, just like Yu-Gi-Oh! I revisited it, and I just, like, I was completely lost. I'm like, I don't know what... I can't learn any of this. Like, I don't want to learn any of this. I just want to go back to vanilla. And that's how I feel about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is I just, like, up to about 5Ds GX, around there, that's where I can, like, I'm fully knowledgeable about the card game. But, like, past that, completely lost me. You lost me. I don't know where to go from there. But if you were to watch... This is me saying, I would recommend Yu-Gi-Oh! It's good to have on in the background. It's good to just have it on. If you need something to just, like, have on, or you want to have a little bit of interest with, I would very much recommend watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. I was about to say GX. I am actually watching GX too, but I'm going to finish Duel Monsters first. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, I would look up a guide on how to avoid all the filler, because there's a lot of filler. It's like Naruto, where there's just like or Bleach, there's just a lot of filler that you don't really want to waste your time watching. So don't bother wasting your time watching it. But I would recommend watching the actual series. Find like kind of like a Dragon Ball Z Kai. Just get rid of the filler. Yeah, that's just me rambling about Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Check out the links down below and subscribe for future rambles.